Hey everyone, today we're going to be talking about Lord of the Flies chapter 5 and 6. So specifically today we're going to talk about some specific important moments in both chapters, some foreshadowing, and then also theme. So chapter 5 starts off with the boys are about to have a meeting that Ralph has called because of the incident with the hunters leaving the fire unattended to go hunt a pig. So he's thinking about what he's going to say at this meeting, what he's going to say to all these boys. And he has two big realizations as he's going over his thoughts. The first realization is more about himself and his own feelings, and the second one is about the boys. So the first realization he has, and the author writes, with the convulsion of the mind, Ralph discovered dirt and decay, understood how much he disliked perpetually flicking the tangled hair out of his eyes and rolling noisily to rest among dry leaves. So obviously at this point, they've been on the island for a while, and Ralph knows where they are and knows that they are dirty and that there's leaves everywhere. But in this moment, he has a sort of jolt and becomes very aware of those facts. He talks about how uncomfortable he is in the heat, about his shorts rubbing on his legs. So he has this big realization of how uncomfortable he is being on the island and how unhappy he is. So that's the first realization. The second realization is about the other boys on the island. So when he gets back to the meeting area, he notices a specific log that has been there that is wobbly. So whenever the boys sit on the log, they fall off. And he notices and has this thought that he saw no one had the wit, not himself, nor Jack, nor Piggy, to bring a stone and wedge the thing. So he realizes that there's been a simple solution to this all along. Just bring a stone, wedge it under the log, and it will no longer be wobbly. And he realizes that no one's had that, not even himself. And so he's thinking more about how everyone is thinking, including himself as the chief, and how that's affecting where they are on the island and what their actions are. And he has an even more specific thought about Piggy. And he realizes that Piggy was no chief, but Piggy had brains. Ralph was a specialist in thought now and could recognize thought in another. So after his long thinking process on the beach, walking around, reflecting and figuring out what he was going to say during the meeting, Ralph has realized that although Piggy is no chief, obviously, he is smart and he can help Ralph. He has good thoughts and that he should be respected for his thoughts. So he has these two realizations and they get to the meeting. Now, most of the meeting, he talks about just going over rules, about everyone contributing, about everyone, using the bathroom in the right place, etc., etc. And at the end, he brings up the topic of fear and the beastie. And he does this because he thinks that the beastie is tearing the boys apart and it's causing a lot of problems, which it is. So he addresses it to the little ones and to everyone, but he says, we've got to talk about this fear and decide. There's nothing in it. I'm frightened myself sometimes, only that's nonsense. Then when we've decided, we can start again and be careful about things like the fire and be happy. So he says, I understand that you guys are scared. I am too. But we have to realize there's nothing out there. We're just scared of the unknown. And we need to push that away and focus on what's important, such as the fire and getting rescued. So he gives this speech, he addresses fear and the beastie and how he thinks the boys should deal with it, and then he sets the conch down, and it signifies that the meeting is over. But, of course, Jack decides that he has something to say too, so he grabs the conch without asking, and he gives his opinion. And his speech is different than Ralph's. And it's very mean. He addresses the little ones specifically. He says, you little ones started all this with the fear talk. Anyway, you don't hunt or build or help. You're a bunch of crybabies and sissies. Serve you right if something did get you, you useless lot of crybabies. But there is no animal. So, a little bit different than Ralph's approach. He's just really mean to the little ones. He's calling them crybabies. Ralph also said that they don't help, but he just told them that they need to. He didn't make fun of them for it or yell at them. So Jack, again, is showing his power or trying to show that he's powerful too, but it's a very different approach than Ralph. Um, so we see this. And so then there is this fight about the beastie. Does it exist? Does it not exist? What should we do? And at the end of this, Simon chimes in. Now, Simon, as we have discovered, is a thoughtful, reflective person who seems to always know what's going on. And he chimes in at the end and says, maybe there is a beast, which shocks everyone, including Ralph, who says, you too, Simon? But the beast that Simon is talking about is not a scary monster that the little ones might be afraid of. So he says, maybe there is a beast. I don't know. What I mean is, maybe it's only us. Simon became inarticulate in his effort to express mankind's essential illness. So Simon has this revelation that the beast is just the boys. And he's talking about mankind's essential illness. And one of the questions that I asked you guys was, what does that mean? What is mankind's essential illness? And there were some really great answers. You guys talked about how it might be the fact that fear can come from anything, the fact that the boys have quickly downgraded from being civilized, that they've turned on each other, the fact that we as humans look for fear in different situations. So those are all great answers, and none of them are wrong. The mankind's essential illness can be talked about in various ways, but essentially what it is just the evil in man, right? And we know that in this book, William Golding is addressing the fact, is evil something that is in every human? How does it come out? So this essential evil that we all have in us as humans, right? And Simon is the one that picks up on this, of course. So we have that. That is the end of chapter 5. So moving on to chapter 6. We're going to talk a little bit, about foreshadowing. So foreshadowing, the keystone definition, is an organizational device used in literature to create expectation or to set up an explanation of later developments. So I know that you guys have gone over this before. Foreshadowing, it just hints at what's going to happen next. At the very end of chapter 5, we have a huge bit of foreshadowing. The rest of the boys have gone off, and Ralph, Simon, and Piggy are talking. And Ralph says, if only they could get a message to us. If only they could send us something grown up, a sign or something. And that's foreshadowing right to the next page at the beginning of chapter 6, when we get the beast from air. So the figure from the sky comes down, right? And Golding describes this to us objectively. It's not from any boy's perspective. None of the boys see it. A sign came down from the world of grown-ups, though at the time there was no child awake to read it. There was a speck above the island, a figure dropping swiftly beneath a parachute, a figure that hung with dangling limbs. So we get this sign from the adults that Ralph was looking for, but unfortunately, no one was there to see it. And so obviously it's a man, it's a parachuter, and we can assume from what we read about it that he's a dead man. He's dead, he's floating down on his parachute, and he lands on the island. And the people that discover him are Sam and Eric, except they don't discover him as a parachuter, they discover him as the beast. So Sam and Eric are tending the fire up on the mountain, and Sam and Eric notice this sort of figure in the distance, this weird shape. And so they see it and they became motionless, gripped in each other's arms, 4 unwinking eyes aimed and 2 mouths open. The hair on their foreheads fluttered and flames blew out sideways from the fire. 15 yards away from them came the plopping noise of fabric blowing open. So we don't know exactly what they're seeing, but we know it's some sort of shape and outline of the parachuter and his parachute, which is blowing in the wind and making noise. They see this, they think it's the beast, they panic, and they run down the mountain to tell the other boys what they've seen. Now, their report to the other boys is a little bit different than what they actually see. They describe the beast as furry. It has eyes, teeth, claws. They say that we ran and it chased us, right? So obviously they sensationalize what they've seen. There was no teeth, there was no claws. The beast didn't chase them, although I suppose they could have felt they were being chased. But so this is a whole new thought, a whole new image of the beast. This is the first time the beast has been seen by any of the boys. So we have this new situation. Sam and Eric wake Ralph up. They wake everyone up. They tell them what they've seen. And naturally, everyone is terrified. So something has to be done. And in this meeting, they're trying to figure out what to do. And Ralph makes the decision that Piggy will stay back with the little ones because he can't help out because his glasses are broken. He can only see out of one eye. So he's going to stay back with the little ones while the rest of the boys go and explore and search for the beast. And Jack is not pleased about that, but Jack is not pleased about anything. So he confronts Ralph and he says, you always stand up for Piggy. You always stand up for Piggy, and I'm just tired of it, blah, 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 blah. And then he says this. He says, we don't need the conch. It's time some people knew they've got to keep quiet and leave deciding things to the rest of us, right? And as we know from our lesson on symbolism, the conch is something that symbolizes civilization and order. It symbolizes this connection to the real world. And so Jack specifically is saying, we don't need it anymore. You know, we don't need it. So it's interesting to see that he, of course, is taking this step away from civilization, but not just for himself. He's also saying that the entire group should step away from this civilization point. So that's interesting. Next, the boys set out to explore and look for the beast. Now, they're all going, and Ralph is extremely nervous about this because as chief, he knows that he is leading the mission. He's the one that's going to have to confront the beast. And the boys are headed to the part of the island they haven't been, the only part of the island. And if you look on the map from the beginning of when we started reading the book, this is actually the part of the island that's called Castle Rock, but the boys don't start calling it that until later on. But it's this opposite end of the island from the mountain. You can see it's this rocky jut out. The author describes this rocky bridge to get to it. You can kind of see there how there's this little rocky bridge to get to this big rock. So that's where they're headed. It's the only place where they really haven't been, and they assume the beast must live there because that's where they haven't been. So they go to Castle Rock. Ralph is very brave. He goes up by himself. Of course, Jack follows because he has to be there. And there is no beast. And so the boys then all come up to Castle Rock and explore it. And it's interesting to look at the different reactions between Ralph and Jack about Castle Rock. Jack thinks it's awesome. He's like, we should set up camp here. It's great. Look at this. We could push this boulder off if we wanted to scare someone. Ralph is like, it's not practical. We don't have fresh water. Not a good idea. And the other boys, when they come up, are also taken with Castle Rock, and they agree with Jack that we should stay here, we should build a castle, a camp here. And Ralph has to continually ask them and tell them that, no, we're leaving. We're going to go keep looking for the beast elsewhere, right? And the chapter ends with a really important line. So Ralph has been saying, we're leaving, we're going to the mountain, we're leaving. The boys have been protesting. And finally, he yells at them, and they start to go. But it's significant that Jack leads the way down the rock and across the bridge. So even though Ralph is the one that gave the directive, Jack is the one that is leading the boys. The boys are following Jack. So also significant. Anyway, we're going to talk now about theme. And some specific themes in the book. And we'll continue to talk about this throughout the rest of the book, but today we're going to just get started. So, theme, what is it? The keystone definition is the author's message revealed in universal terms. So basically, the theme is something that's a major idea. It's broad enough to cover the entire scope of a literary work. So it's not something that just happens in one chapter. The whole book is related to this topic, okay? So I realize that's very vague. So we're going to get into a little more detail. Now, this chart is going to be on your notes, so don't panic. You'll have the information, but we are going to go over it quickly. So what theme is and is not? Theme is the author's message expressed in universal terms. It's some significant issue that affects humanity, not just the characters in the book. It's a problem or issue that can face all of humanity. It is expressed in a sentence, and it's complicated. And there can be, and usually are, more than one theme in a work. Now, theme is not the subject or topic of a story, for example, love, war. It's not restricted to the characters or action of the story, so it's not something that just happens there. It can affect all of humanity. It's not expressed as a moral or a lesson. So for example, it's not people should get along, all right? And then it's also not expressed in one word. It should be more complicated than just one word. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how to figure out how to write a thematic statement, all right? And to do so, we're going to watch this video. Look at him, so cute. All right, so I'll play the video, but I'll also put the link on YouTube, or not on YouTube, the link on Google Classroom if you want to watch it later. So let's take a look. Three steps on how to write a theme statement. So you guys are going to be doing that for your assignments, all right? So let's look at another literary example. So for To Kill a Mockingbird, which we've all read, all right? So a theme topic, I picked prejudice, right? But remember, it's not just a single word. We have to think more in depth about what the author's message about prejudice is. So what is the author of the text saying? What's the message? Step 2, we're going to put in that the author believes this. So Harper Lee believes that prejudice is learned, not innate, right? And that's something that we see throughout To Kill a Mockingbird with Scout and Jem and their reactions to the trial. So then we delete Harper Lee believes that. Step 3. So our final thematic statement is prejudice is learned, not innate. All right? Notice how there are no specifics from the story, like character names, all right? The theme is universal, so it should be able to be applied to all stories and all mankind. So you don't want to use characters' names, you don't want to use setting, just the theme, the topic, and what the author's message is. All right, evidence that was also addressed in the video. So what evidence do we have that supports our theme? All right, you want to make sure that your theme makes sense in the context of the text by identifying moments where that idea is presented. And normally a theme, because it conveys the entire text message, it is throughout the story. So there's usually many, many examples that you can use. All right, so 3 examples from our theme statement from To Kill a Mockingbird. Prejudice is learned, not innate. For example, Scout repeats racist language that she hears at school. Scout uses the N-word to describe a snowman, but she is just repeating what she's heard, not saying it out of malice. After the Tom Robinson trial, the children have seen prejudice and are enraged by it, now that they understand it, right? So we see that development in the children, specifically Scout, that prejudice is learned. It's not something that is born into humans, all right? So your assignment is to complete the worksheet on Google Classroom, and you are going to end up writing your own theme statement for Lord of the Flies thus far. Obviously, we have so much more to read, not that much more, but a lot more action. Anyway, so you're going to write your own theme statement. You are going to do a worksheet that's going to help you write it, and then you're going to submit the worksheet, obviously, but I'm also going to ask you to submit your final theme statement in a Google form just so that I can compile them all, and then we will take a look at them next